Take control of your life. Break the chains and rise. No more feeling powerless. No more shame. Take your power. Break out of the pain. Because it's more than fornication. More than procreation. It's not just self-stimulation. Sex energy is for creation and transformation into a new destination.
This is Porn Talk.
Porn Talk. Yeah. Change your heart from dark to light. Porn Talk. Yeah. Break free. Take back your power and rise. I said take back your power. I said take back your power. Take back your power and rise.
This is Porn Talk. Here is your host, Eric Zuzak.
5-time #1 best-selling author, international speaker and consultant. He's been paid to stand on stages in over 30 countries, and his message has been translated in over 40 languages. Today, we will hear some great stories, powerful lessons, and we'll have some fun too. He is a licensed brain trainer, neuro-encoding specialist. Help me welcome Sean Murphy. Welcome, Sean.
Eric, I'm so excited to be here. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the dedication you've had. For Brene Brown says that your vulnerability gives others courage. And I can only imagine how many people applaud you on a daily basis who get to listen or download this podcast to give them the courage to break some of their own heavy, rusty chains.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But let's hear your story. Licensed brain trainer, neuro-encoding specialist, changing the hardware rather than the software. Tell us about you.
So real quick, when I was 14, I had an emotional experience that made me say these words: I'll never have another bad day. Now, it didn't all happen all at once, yet from that moment, I decided to pay attention to the environment I was in. I had already been programmed right from childhood. When we get programmed, mom was a little bit of a drinker, and so that makes you kind of codependent. We didn't have all of these labels when we were growing up. They just said you're challenged, you're sticky, you're clingy, and you have all of these languages. So I learned, and then my dad put me into sales from a very early age. My first sales call, I was 16 years old in a coal mine, and I got rejected. And my dad pushed me through the rejection from 8 a.m. to 1 in the morning when I finally wasn't rejected. And that's a whole nother story. So I had to realize it was me that was doing the rejection. It was me that was saying no to myself. It was me not believing in myself. So go on to vice president of sales of a $200 million company where you're in charge of a sales force, and you realize how addicted everybody is to this thing called approval.
Mm.
And so what I figured out is I need to learn on the brain. Everybody has different stories, yet 98% of the population feels rejected. 2% have, 3% have all the wealth, and some of them aren't really that happy. But the other 98% write sticky notes and they don't work, and they go to seminars and they don't work. And we call these things called books called shelf help instead of self-help. So I worked in this idea saying there's something wrong with the hardware, because all of the programming, all of the software, all of the events and books and tapes and trainings, they don't seem to be producing the result everybody wants, because things are not better than they should be. So that's why I went into brain training, neuro-encoding, mental toughness, self-talk, hypnotherapy, and a few other things that allow me to help rewire the hardware and upgrade the hardware in someone's brain.
Wow. I remember the day you talk about taking all the seminars and online courses and books. And one day back when I was deep in my addiction, I had a mammoth library of self-improvement stuff, and I took most all of it and I dumped it in a church's dumpster. Never forget the day. But later on, I went to learn that it wasn't the self-development. It was other things like my brain. And so how can one change the hardware? I understand it's changing the software of the brain, what we put in and things like that. But how does one change your brain? But, I'm getting ahead of myself. You said you had worked at 16 years old in sales for a coal mine?
Well, we were professional. We were a professional sales family, right? You hear about families who are joining the circus. Our families joined the other circus called sales. And so my dad taught us from a very early age to go sell things. I was selling corn off a hay wagon when I was 5 years old. He drops me off in a coal mine at 6:30 in the morning and says, go sell something. I come out at noon. Now I'm 16. My dad come out at noon. He's in the parking lot of this coal mine in Wheelwright, West Virginia. And he says, what'd you sell? I said, I didn't sell anything. He said, what are you doing out here? I said, everybody's at lunch. He says, well, where are you going? I said, we're going to lunch. He says, you ain't got any money for lunch. You didn't sell anything. And if you fast forward, you can guess what happened at dinner when I didn't sell anything. We weren't going for dinner. I had to go back in, slug back into, and I was carrying the old leather briefcase with about 40 pounds of tool steel and square steel stock, and came out around 8 o'clock, shift change, second shift is already going, third shift is coming on. And I said, there's only a skeleton crew. He says, well, where are you going? I said, we're going to the hotel. I'll try tomorrow. He says, you got no money to go to sleep. At 1:30 in the morning, I'm sitting across from this superintendent. There's 6 guys in this coal mine now running the tipple, the wash plant. And I said, all I want is somebody to buy something. And he said, what? I said, all I want is somebody to buy something. He says, what are you selling? I said, I'm selling 2.5-inch round TGP, turned ground and polished steel. He said, great, I'll take 12 inches. I said, outstanding. So I had an order. I ran back out to my dad and I said, I got your order. Let's go. He goes, oh, 12 inches? He goes, they come in 20-foot random lengths. Who's paying for the other 19 feet?
Oh, God. Oh, God.
So you can tell I lived it. It's visceral in my body at this moment. And we always have those moments. The challenge is that too many people, when they have the addiction doesn't happen that way. See, I didn't know I was addicted to being refused. I didn't know I was addicted to the approval of others. My dad just kept reminding me, push through it, push through it, push through it. Well, when you're on your own and when you're by yourself, some of these addictions, you can't push through yourself. The hit that happens in the brain, what I realized is that we get hits in the brain of dopamine that's more powerful than any morphine. So then that kind of started my journey into understanding personal development, which, by the way, I've revamped. Yes, one guy from Arkansas revamped the personal development industry. I don't know, but I now call it personal undevelopment. We have to get back to the foundational source where the crap started to happen. So.
Interesting. So getting back to what you said a little earlier about the sales circus, because there's a lot of guys that listen to this are entrepreneurs or salespeople, business owners, and they can, I'm sure, relate to the sales circus. I know I can.
Well, you hear the Zig Ziglars and they sold pots and pans and they were the number one this. You hear the people all the time sold the Kirby vacuum. I just saw somebody that the guy, the vacuum store had the Kirby, the same Kirby he sold back in the 70s. So those of us who are entrepreneurial realize we want to control our own future. We want to control our own success. And what I'm loving what you're doing here is that addictions have a tendency to have us go skyrocket, high. And then we've got this because we're addicted to success. And then we also offset that by some of our addictions to success.
And one of the challenges that entrepreneurs and salespeople have that's a little different from the average person that has a job is that you spend a lot of time by yourself, especially if you're starting out in sales, hitting the pavement, or picking up the phone. You spend a lot of time by yourself, and it can be challenging for a lot of people.
Well, the challenge is that rejection we are predispositioned in our DNA to avoid rejection. And the reason that is because as a child, we have to have some kind of cognizance of something that could hurt us, right? The brain does two things. Will it kill me, or how fast can I recognize the pattern? So from a very early childhood, we're addicted to the approval of others. We bring mom that little weed. Remember when you brought mom the weed and she went, oh my God, it's the most beautiful flower. And she put it in a book and everything else. And you're like, and you open the book when mom's gone. You're like, oh my God, is that the flower I gave her? Why did she save that? Because we gave it to her. And the challenge is that that addiction never stops at childhood. It goes on into school, where we go on and be the teacher's pet, especially if we think the teacher's like super hot, right? That we think the teacher's hot and sexy and like, oh my God, she liked me. She touched my shoulder. And this is guys. I can't speak for girls. But all of a sudden, we now want to make sure we get the golden star. And then we leave school and we go to college, and then we probably take a course or we take a degree that really wasn't ours. Our parents wanted us to take it. And then we go to work, and now we got to make the boss happy to get the raise. And we just constantly have this addiction for approval. And when we get off on our own, like you said, into the silence and into the quiet of our own selves, if we find something that all of a sudden gives us that dopamine hit, that gives us the chance to not be rejected, we want more of that. And that addiction can be alcohol, can be porn, can be a variety of things. So that's why I went back into the brain, because a lot of people are addicted to their old story, and it's keeping them just absolutely broke.
Yeah, absolutely. When talking about the brain, I can't help but think there's an old song from, I don't know, maybe the 90s. It was.
Isn't that funny to say the 90s are an old song? I'm sorry. Flashback.
It goes something like insane in the membrane.
Yes.
Insane in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Insane in the membrane. Insane in the brain.
Do you remember the cartoons that made that made it famous?
I don't.
I can. Yeah. Anyways, well, let's continue because.
Sure. But so anyway, the brain chemistry.
Yes.
The needing to feel good. So when I was in a sales position where I was literally, hitting the bricks, walking from business to business, and I would be like, and after X amount of rejections, then I go back and, instead of prospecting, I was masturbating. And that really doesn't help business.
It doesn't. It's the Band-Aid that you had available to you to stop the pain. The challenge is with something like that later on, when you become cognizant of it, and you man, I don't know why I do that. Here's the question. If anybody has ever said, I don't know why I do that, you have to really pay attention. You're not the same I that's asking the question that was actually doing the act. And that's where we get confused. We have these separate identities, but what happens is in the brain, we have these neural networks. And as a self-talk instructor, as somebody who teaches on the Self-Talk Institute, everything that you've said, anything you've ever done has been recorded in your brain. That which you repeat on a regular basis becomes permanent. And what happens is the new neural pathways of wanting to break this addiction. You're talking about a 7-lane highway versus a goat path of frequency, allowing electrons to run down. And the way that you change something is what's called through neural pruning. It's almost impossible to shut down a 7-lane highway with all of the stimuli that can happen. So that's another challenge of why it's so difficult, because the more it's done, the more it's repeated, the more it's laid down, the more it's easier. And the brain says, everything is this. And that's the way we get our recognition. We get our acceptance. So it's a challenge. It really is.
That highway in your brain, all those, we built this highway of sex and porn addiction, and so that is that was my crutch that I leaned on. And you had said something really important. You said the things that we repeat to ourselves become permanent. And so I had wanted to crush this addiction. So I did what my doctor told me and said I had to go to 12-step meetings. And in the 12-step meetings, every single time I went, we'd say, hi. I'd say, hi, this is how you were supposed to introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Eric. I'm a sexaholic and I'm addicted to porn. And oh no, I'm sorry. And I'm powerless over porn. And that is what I said for almost 2 decades. And guess what? I didn't get any shocker here.
Shocker.
I didn't get much better. In fact, I actually got worse in the 12-step programs.
Well, Hippocrates found out that when somebody had a cold, he realized that I can't treat them the same way. That's why we have the 4 personality types, is because of medicine. And Hippocrates, when he said, I need to be able to figure out why this person doesn't get well, and he had to change the solution for each person, even though the diagnosis was the same. And so what happens is that's how we wound up with I don't know, all of the person. I know DISC, D-I-S-C, right? And then there's the go-getter, the red, the blue, the yellow, the green. And then maybe you're a whale or a dolphin or a guppy or a turtle. The thing is that there's 4 kinds of personalities. And the challenge is that every word has a result. And depending upon what their programming is, there's core beliefs that are inside of you. They're not personality traits, they're core beliefs. And that's different. And when you understand your core beliefs and you find out what those are, then you have to decide you now have the foundation that you can go build something with. The Amen Institute realizes there's 16 brain types. There's 4 primary, and then there's the combination of them. And when you understand the brain type, a couple of things happen. One, sometimes there's a huge nutritional deficiency that can upgrade the hardware. Could you imagine your car running without oil? Most people don't have enough omegas in their brain, not in their body, in their brain, to allow them to make better decisions. So there's all of these little things that stack on top of each other. We used to own a machine shop, and there's something called stack tolerances. You put this one on top of this one on top of this one, and if those 3 things were each an inch, by the time you stack them, because of the irregularities, it's bigger than 3 inches. Well, you stack a porn addiction, and you stack a poor childhood, and you stack a bad relationship and a rejection from a sale, and all of a sudden it's more than just the 4 of those. And instantly we look for release. We look to alleviate our pain. We either do it for love or to avoid pain. And the things we do to avoid pain sometimes create more pain, but it's that addiction that we can easily fall into. I know this works temporarily, and that's why it's called an addiction.
Right. I really want to get into using nutrition to change your brain a little later, but you're talking about love and self-love, and you had told this story about Bob Proctor. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Bob Proctor is an expert on Think and Grow Rich, and actually worked with what's the mustache guy, the Napoleon Hill's buddy?
Carnegie? No, I know who you're talking about.
It's on the top
yes,
line.
his vice president of sales ran the insurance company.
Anyway, he has links to Think and Grow Rich. I'll just to Napoleon Hill. So Bob Proctor does.
Yep.
So that is huge. And in the book Think and Grow Rich, chapter 11 has the mystery of sex transmutation. Right. It is a must read if you're listening to this podcast. But anyway, if you could tell the story about Bob Proctor and self-love.
So about 23 years ago, I hired Bob as a mentor, and my bride and I were going through his classes. And in 2004, our house was destroyed in Florida by the 3 hurricanes that crisscrossed right over Central Florida. And I called Bob and I said, Bob, I'm aggravated. I'm agitated. This is ridiculous. I can't do this. I'm trying to build my business out of my truck. And he says, how's your gratitude working? I said, what am I grateful for? I'm looking at my house. It's got a yellow sticker on it. It's condemned. I said, what am I supposed to do? He says, why don't you love yourself? I go, are you crazy? I said, what are you talking about? I said, we're professionals. We're the world-class leaders of our He says, I said, do you love yourself? And he goes, and he backs away from the phone because we weren't on Zoom. He backs away from the phone. He goes, love myself. What the hell are you doing? He says, I'm kissing myself. I kiss myself all the time. And he shifted my state. And I tell that story 2 or 3 times a week now. If we don't fall back in love with ourselves, it's always this outside thing that keeps us from becoming aware of the joy we're in right now. Sadhguru says, in this moment, choose misery or choose joy. And people who are addicted have masked misery because of the dopamine hit to be the thing of joy in their life. And it's really a chemical addiction to just a variety of things.
Yeah. The big challenge is with the self-love is usually, like when I would act out with pornography, afterwards, I would feel so much guilt and shame afterwards. I certainly didn't feel self-love.
Right.
So what would you say to the person that's listening right now that's really struggling and they're talking to the screen or talking to their phone right now going, what? Say I love myself? Are you crazy? Like, give me something practical. Like, what do you say to that person?
So understanding that the brain's looking for 2 things. Will this kill me, or how fast could I recognize the pattern? Right now, if you're listening to me, a new voice, you've probably listened to Eric a while, and he's a familiar voice. This is literally what happens in the brain, the vibrational state. You're okay with that. You know he's on your side. You know he's got the chutzpah. He's got the stripes that he's been there. My voice, on the other hand, isn't that. And it can become as literally as an attack. And that's the identity. We call it in the 4 archetypes that people use. That's the warrior that shows up. And the warrior that shows up is ready for the fight. And you have been fighting this dis-ease, as Bob Proctor would say, your body not at ease for minutes, days, decades. And it's not easy to let that down, to think this is simple to change. So here's some practical steps. This one's gonna send you to the edge. It's gonna push you to the edge. Start to write down 10 things you love about you. I have my students write out 500 things they've done well. The challenge is when you're an addict, you're thinking that the things you've done well need to be Pulitzer Prize quality to offset the pain and suffering you've been in. And the reality is it does not. I'm telling you, the challenge is that you don't have enough evidence of how amazing you are. Because the most recent evidence we use is the one where we, as Eric said, we feel guilt, we feel shame, we feel less than. So while you're not in one of those tender states, write down things that you've done well. And I'm serious about anything. Did you graduate 2nd grade? Right? Did you learn how to drive a car? Have you ever been on a plane? See, we don't think those are, well, that's nothing. Everybody's done. No, it was your first time at some time. Your porn started the first time at some time. And if we can go back to the moments, it's literally a math problem, Eric. If we have enough moments to where we can get out of our ears and into our own eyes and see our evidence that we're a good person, that we've done well, if you've ever hit a sales target, if you've ever raised a child, if you've ever, whatever, you got a passport, any of these things qualify for things that you've done well.
Yeah.
We need evidence. This is evidence-based. You have the evidence of the addiction. You have the evidence of the guilt. You have the evidence of the files on your computer, whatever it is. We need to go to battle and find the evidence of all of the things that make you an amazing soul.
I completely agree with you. And Anthony Robbins calls what you just described stacking. Mm-hmm. He says that getting rid of guilt and shame is really challenging. That's the bottom of the rung on the emotional ladder. And he says, instead of trying to get rid of it, is to stack all those successes up and write them down, like you said. So that's awesome. I love that you said that.
And for those listening, if they draw a little box real quick on their paper, and in the top left of the box, they put potential. What's the potential you have to overcome the addiction? What's the potential? Not saying you can do it in a second, but what's the potential? It's 100%. It's possible. Then there's the actions. So top left, potential. Top right, actions. What are the actions you can take? See, the actions determine our results. So bottom right-hand corner under actions, you can put results. And then our results determine what? Our beliefs. And that's where this potential is taken away from us because of these past beliefs. And when we have limiting beliefs, we have limiting potential, which limits our actions, which limits our results, and then the vicious cycle starts. If you start with the writing down the things that you've done well, the stacking start to stack in your favor, here's what's going to happen. That little voice in your head, that little addiction to approval is going to, as soon as you start and write down going, I graduated first grade. This is stupid. You're already saying it, and then you go, I learned to ride a bike. How freaking, this guy's an idiot. I'm not an idiot. That's your old story, looking for validation to not change your identity.
And change your identity. So that's my story. I had went to countless 12-step meetings and said that I was powerless over the addiction, that I was a sexaholic. And finally one day I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not working. And I found this little app that uses to help break addictions. And just on a whim, I was creating my login and password. And I thought, I'm going to put my login as Powerful Eric. And in that moment, pitiful, powerless, porn addicted Eric died, and Powerful Eric was born. Identity change is huge.
Well, and this is why I've done trainings on limiting identities. And literally, those identities can rip the fabric of time and space and make you see things that aren't there, make you do things that, how many of you have ever been in an argument with somebody and at the end of it, when it was all said and done, somebody says, I can't believe you said that. What did I say? You said this. There's no way I said that. Oh, hell yeah, I have it. I got it on video. I was waiting for you to throw fists. And what happens is that we don't realize who we are. We wind up going back into our default mode. There's something in the brain called the default mode network that when we're not activated by our environment, we wind up in our default mode. This is how you can drive home for 2 hours or 45 minutes in traffic and go, how did I get home? I don't even remember getting home. This is how you can spend 2 or 3 hours addicted to porn, watching porn, doing that, and you don't even realize the time is gone because it's your default mode network. There's ways around that, and it's activating the prefrontal cortex, activating the thinking mind again, and we can talk more about that on the second part.
Yeah, and I would love to hear more about that. And like I said, using nutrition to actually physically change your brain, all these things are just so important. I was just before I got on this podcast with you, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she, as coincidence would have it, is just now taking recently some brain supplements, and she said that they've been really helpful. And by the way, I'm not selling brain supplements here, but I'm just saying that she found it really helpful.
Yeah, there's certain things, GABA, omega-3s in the right percentages, DEA, DH. It's hydration. We're a 5% reduction in hydration, which most people are almost chronically dehydrated. But a 5% reduction in short-term memory and a 5% reduction in hydration is a 2% loss of short-term memory. So if you want to get 2% smarter like quick, get your right amount of fluid flow into your body.
Right. Well, Sean, I appreciate you being with us today. We're going to have Sean back for the next podcast as well. So, Sean, any final words for us today before we meet?
Jim Rohn said you can't go back and make a brand new start. You can start and create a brand new ending. And it's not that you need to do more, it's you need to do less. And when that sinks in, you'll realize you have all of the capability and capacity in you right now.
Awesome. Love it. All right. So please join us next week. Sean will share more of the how-tos and the positive side of things of the brain, changing the brain. And so we will see you next week.
Are you struggling with porn or sex addiction? Then apply for a free strategy call with Eric today at powerfuleric.com.